Hi everyone, we are going to have a lesson on living cells. It is class 9 English medium and chapter name is Living Cells. It is chapter 5 of Karnataka state textbooks. In this particular lesson, we are going to learn names of organelles, what functions they perform, and also in detail we will be learning on the structure of different organelles, especially organelles like plasma membrane, cell wall, mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, like that. We may not be able to go in detail, but we will be definitely learning more about these organelles compared to your 8th standard class. In the 8th standard class, we have just mentioned you about the different names of organelles, but in this class, you are going to learn more and more about the functional part of these cells. Cells, what we call the living cells, are there in almost every individual. If the cells are not living, then the body or the organ or the tissue will not function. Therefore, after a long research of many scientists, they have come to a particular conclusion, what is called cell theory, that indicates that cells are the structural and functional units of all living beings, all forms of living beings. You have studied in your lower classes that the world of living beings has been divided into 5 major divisions, and any of these divisions you take may contain millions of organisms, which may be small, which may be large, which may be a plant, which may be an animal. But all these living organisms, as long as they are living, they have living cells. And therefore, this particular concept called cells are structural and functional units of living beings is known by the name cell theory. This was introduced about 100 years ago and still it continues. Here we go for a recapitulation of what you studied in the lower classes. You studied already that animals, plants, and microorganisms are divided into various forms and various what you call levels. In other words, the entire living kingdom has been divided into earlier 2 divisions called plants and animals. Later on, it became 3 divisions like protista, plants, animals. Then it became 4. Now it has become 5. The 5 kingdoms today, what we have in your textbooks is one is called the Monera, the most primitive forms of all the living beings, and this Monera group may not be either plants or animals, or they may be in between. So it is very difficult to tell from Monera which level it goes to, whether plant or animal, but their primitive forms. Even the cellular contents are not highly organized like the plant or animal cells, so therefore they are called Monera. And you have studied already many examples for this in your own class. Now coming to the second one called Protista, a little more organized, little more evolved than Monera. These Protista are again single-celled organisms, so they go between plants and animals, in between them. Some of the protists may behave like and show structures like animal cells. Some may behave like plants and show structures like plants. And therefore, protista itself is a highly complicated, well-structured kingdom. And then comes Mycota. First one is Monera, second is Protista, third is Mycota. Mycota was earlier included in Protista. Mycota refers to the fungi group of organisms. Earlier, people thought fungi group of organisms belong to plant kingdom, and therefore they put them in the plant kingdom as fungi, as chloroplastless plants. But today, the scientists have come to a conclusion: it's a group by itself, a kingdom by itself. Therefore, it goes under name Mycota. These show the characteristics of plants, like they attach themselves to the substratum or place where they live. They are again microorganisms. Some of them may be big forms like mushrooms. And then these do not have a regular feeding habit. They depend upon dead and decaying matter, or they live inside certain organisms. For example, some of the fungi that infect your skin live on the food produced by your own body. So fungi may live as uh, independent organisms like mushrooms, depending upon the dead and decaying matter, or they may become parasites. Now next comes the Plantae. The kingdom Plantae is characterized by plants. Plants have got a definite way and a definite way of living and structure. They are all at, they live in the they fix to the soil, and they have roots to absorb water, and they have green leaves to manufacture their own food. They are called autotrophs. They have chloroplast in them, and their cell have cell wall. Chloroplast absorbs sunlight with the help of carbon dioxide. They fix carbon in the form of glucose that will go as a reserve supply to all the other living beings. So plants have a separate way of living. Then comes animalia. Animals, these are all heterotrophs. They have no capacity to make their own food from raw materials like that of the plants. So the cells of the animals may have certain structures which are not seen in the plants, or opposite of it, whatever the organelles we see in the plant cells may not be seen in the animal cells. Therefore, there is a distinction between animal cell and the plant cell. That is an important thing that we have to learn. To close up this particular presentation, we say all living beings have cells. Cells have organelles in them. They are the specialized parts to do the different functions. Cells may vary in shape, size, depending upon the kingdom they belong to. Their functions also depend upon the environment and the kingdom they belong to. All cells use energy, and they have a capacity to divide, what's called cell division. All living cells do that. That's why I call this as living cells. And cells may aggregate, they may form into colony, they may form into tissues, and tissues may form into organs. Organs may form into uh, organ system, and then we may get what we call the organism. So if you remember these five important divisions, whatever the plant kingdom it may be, they all have cells. As I told, cells are seen in almost every living being, and cells we say are common to all types of cells. It may be a plant cell, animal cell, protista, whatever the type of cell you take, there are three basic common parts of a cell called organelles. One is called the plasma membrane. The outermost covering of the cell is called plasma membrane or cell membrane, and inside the cell you have what's called nucleus. That is the control center of all the other activities, and in between you have what's called cytoplasm, and this cytoplasm contains millions of molecules, and each molecule may be doing different function, and some specialized parts inside the cytoplasm organize themselves into small structures called organelles. So we will study today organelles found in the cell. When they ask you to explain the cell structure, you have to remember all the organelles present in the cell and then try to write the diagram. When we study, normally we study what's called a generalized cell, a cell that will talk about all the other forms of life. So we will study a generalized cell in this class. I just explained to you that a cell contains many specialized organized parts called organelles. These organelles are the functional units of any cell. There are many organelles that is present inside the cytoplasm, protected by cell membrane or plasma membrane. What they are? Let's see. Cell membrane, 2. Cytoplasm, 3. Nucleus, 4. Endoplasmic reticulum, 5. Mitochondria, 6. Golgi apparatus, 7. Lysosome, 8. Centriole, 10th. Vacuoles, 11th. Plastids, 12th. Cell wall. See, you can see here organelles are given in general. Some of them are present in plants, some of them are not present in plants. Similarly, some of them are present in animal cells, some of them are not present in the animal cells. The green colored ones I have written vacuoles, plastids and cell wall are very common, are mostly found in the plant cells. They do not find in the animal cells. That you should remember. And centrioles normally are present in the animal cells and they are not seen in the plant cells. If you must remember that cells contain highly specialized structural parts called organelles. These organelles are known to perform special functions. There are many functions. We can discuss them in the next lessons. You studied about the cells in the lower classes. As we go to higher and higher classes, we will study those parts in much more detail. So the Karnataka syllabus has made a what's called both the concentric and the spiral approach in giving you the topics. Now here you find the cell membrane. Earlier class you thought cell membrane is only a covering. Today we will learn more details about the cell membrane. The cell membrane is normally called by name plasma membrane, and this plasma membrane is a living membrane, and it is also called selectively permeable membrane because it allows certain molecules to go inside the cell, certain molecules to go out of the cell, and therefore it is called selectively permeable membrane. It's a living membrane. When you think of the structure, you will find that when you look at that in an electron microscope, you find plasma membrane has two layers, outer layer and the inner layer. Outer layer is in the intracellular space, inner layer is the cytoplasm. Outer layer is made up of proteins and polysaccharide chains. The inner membrane is made up of transport proteins and some phospholipids. In between the two layers, like a sandwich in the sandwich, you have bilipid layers. So that means it is a very complicated structure that requires higher studies for you to understand more about it. But in this class, what you should remember is plasma membrane is living. That's the point number one. Number two, it is selectively permeable. It is made up of two layers. In between, we have the phospholipid layer, and then this plasma membrane allows certain molecules to go inside, certain molecules to come out. For example, the cell inside has a cytoplasm. It has many dissolved molecules. Similarly, outside the cell, in between the cells, you have what's called intracellular fluid or liquid that contains water and many molecules. Molecules may be enzymes, chemicals, whatever the type, different molecules are there, including gas molecules like oxygen and carbon dioxide. Oxygen and carbon dioxide enter into the cell and go out of the cell depending upon the density of the molecules. You have learned about density. Density refers to the number of molecules present in a particular area. So if a small area like 1 centimeter cube contains 1000 molecules, in another one it contains 100. We say 1000 is denser, 100 is less denser or rarer medium. So molecules move in and out depending upon the medium, and there are two types of major cellular movements. One is called diffusion, where molecules, especially gas molecules like oxygen and carbon dioxide, get in and get out of the cells through plasma membrane. The second one is called the osmosis, in which the water molecules containing many required molecules get into the cell by means of osmosis, and the other opposite of that is called plasmolysis. Some molecules go out of the cells, and that's called plasmolysis. You study this in your next classes in much more detail. But so, just to close this plasma membrane, remember the structure of plasma membrane. It has two layers: outer layer, inner layer. In between, bilipid layer is there. It is the living layer. It is selectively permeable membrane. It allows molecules to move in and move out. I did tell you that the plasma membrane is semi-permeable membrane, and it has two layers. One layer is near the cytoplasm. Second one is outside the cytoplasm. So plasma membrane has connecting the outer and the inner environment of the cell. In other words, cytoplasm has the innermost covering of the plasma membrane, and the exterior of the cell where the other cells etc. may be there. In that there is another layer, and that is called the outer membrane. So plasma membrane is a semi-permeable membrane. It has two layers. One layer is towards the cytoplasm, the other one is towards the intercellular space. You know that cells always have inside them cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is almost 80% of water and large number of solute. That means particles like molecules are dissolved in that, including gases. And then the outside the living cells, there is a tissue liquid, and that's called intercellular or intracellular fluid or liquid, that will be again having water, and water will contain many molecules which have been dissolved in that. It may contain food molecules, it may contain enzymes, it may contain some chemicals, it may contain unwanted residues of the cells. So the outside of the cell, the fluid that is contained will have different materials. Thereby, the density will be different. So the density of the cytoplasm inside the cell membrane and the density of the fluid outside the cell membrane may differ. When once they differ, there will be lot of exchange of molecules in and out. Two major movement of molecules are seen depending upon the density of the molecules. One is called the diffusion, especially gas molecules like oxygen and carbon dioxide diffuse from the outside of the cell into the cell and from inside the cell to the outside of the cell. They go on diffusing depending upon the densities they have and utility of those molecules. Similarly, in the liquid medium, in the solvent, that is the water, may have solutes and different molecules. So the density of the liquid present inside the cell called cytoplasm and outside the cell called intercellular fluid, their densities may differ. When densities differ, the molecular movement also differs. However, two types of molecular movement are very well known. One is called the diffusion, where gas molecules normally diffuse, and second is called osmosis. Osmosis specially refers to the movement of water molecules because the density of the liquid inside the cell and outside the cell may constantly be varying. So sometimes water molecules are required into the cell, sometimes water molecules are not required. So whatever the density of the cytoplasm and the exterior of the cell, water molecules will have to move out, and that process is called osmosis, and the opposite of that is called plasmolysis. Osmosis may not use energy, but plasmolysis may use energy. So therefore, you should know that plasma membrane is highly dynamic membrane. Its two inner and outer layers keep constantly changing their configuration. Some parts may become pores sometimes, some parts may close the pores. So the opening and the closing of the pores of the plasma membrane depends upon the density inside the cytoplasm and density outside the cytoplasm. And the pores are made by the cellular components like phospholipids, like proteins, like other type of proteins. So proteins, lipids will form the pore-like structure. So they may open, they may close depending upon the inner and outer the fluid density. Please remember that plasma membrane is a living membrane. It has the capacity to change its structure depending upon the densities. These are two important movements you must remember. One is osmosis, second is diffusion. Little more details about the movement of molecules via plasma membrane. You must remember that the cell is not a single in multicellular organisms. It forms a tissue. When you say tissue, similar cells form into a group. Each cell may be divided or connected by different processes, but one thing that really binds them would be the liquid between the two cells. In this picture on the right side, I have shown you four cells marked in black color, and between them I have shown blue color substance called the liquid or the solution. So these two, when you look at them, there may be three conditions of the solutions depending upon the density or the number of molecules present in the liquid or the solvent. One is called hypotonic. Hypo refers to low. A solution containing lesser number of solute particles is called hypotonic solution. Second is called isotonic solution, in which when you compare the liquid present inside the cell and outside the cell, if they have the same density, imagine you are comparing the density of the glucose molecules. If the glucose molecules are equal in number outside the cell and inside the cell, then it is called isotonic condition. Or if you think of water molecules, supposing if you take the water molecules inside and outside the cell, if they are the same density, it's called isotonic. When the other condition is called hypertonic, where hyper means more. So one of the medium may contain one molecule or many molecules of a higher density, and is called hypertonic, and that solution is called hypertonic solution. Let's take the example here. So let's say inside the cells, due to cellular activity, the cell has secreted a large number of salts which are not useful for the cells. It has to be thrown out. So when you compare the liquid outside the cell, they may contain lesser excretory products or lesser salts that is useful. In this condition, cell is said to be hypertonic and the outside liquid is called the hypotonic. So now what happens is two molecules start moving from the cells. The excretory products will move out of the cell and the clear water comes into the cell, and this is the function of the cell membrane. Because the plasma membrane is living, it can do all these things. Please remember how important plasma membrane is. If some chemicals are taken or added to the cell plasma membrane may break. That happens when COVID and all these viruses attack. They will destroy the cell membrane or plasma membrane. Then toxic materials may easily go in and go out. So let's remember plasma membrane is very important for living. Let's have a just look at the summary of what we have learned today. First thing we learned is cell theory, which explains cells are the structural and functional units of all living beings, any forms of life. Second, cells do contain highly structured parts in the form of organelles. Different organelles are present, but all the cells of any type, either plant or animal or protista, will contain organelles. Depending upon their capacity and the type of work, the organelles may differ their functions. But basic organelles are present in all the cells. Example, mitochondria. Mitochondria is an organelle that it is called the powerhouse of the cell because it generates the energy. It takes the oxygen molecules, it uses the sugar molecules, and then inside the mitochondria they undergo oxidation and then energy is given out, and that kind of organelle called mitochondria is seen in almost all the cells. Therefore, organelles are found in all the cells. Depending upon the type of work, the organelles may do special functions. Then plant cells have three important organelles found only in the plants, not in other organelles. They are called plastids, three types: chromoplast, chloroplast, and leucoplast, large vacuoles, and cell wall. Cell wall is dead material. We will learn about that in the next class. And then finally, the movement of molecules of the cells of the inside and outside the cells takes place due to the difference in the densities, and three different types of densities may be possible: hypotonic, isotonic, and hypertonic. And since plasma membrane is selectively permeable, since it is living layer, it can control the movement of molecules. And that's all we learned in this particular session. We will end up here. Finally, I would like to conclude giving my thanks and credits must be given to Creative Commons, where I have taken a few pictures. Karnataka textbook of class 9 has helped me to take some content to explain to you, and I'm grateful to YouTube for publishing this, and for you also, thank you. Learn well, read the textbook, try to answer the questions given in the chapter. That will help you. Practice writing diagrams including all the cell organelles. I will meet you in the next presentation.